So the first article that we'll be discussing is called Dilemmas in General Theory of Planning, and it is written by Riddle Weber in Policy Sciences in 1973, and this is a very key reading that has had a great impact in the field. Specifically, their wording noting things as wicked or wicked problems. And this is basically problems that traditional scientific means don't really satisfy them. They don't solve these problems, they fail, and these authors cite their wicked nature as the cause of such failures. And this type of argument comes up in various branches of literature, including, uh, besides just general planning, but forest management, ecology, healthcare, education, business administration, environmental ethics, engineering design. It goes on and on. If you even did a wicked problems Google search or Google Scholar search, you'll find that this word's been coming up again and again. And it's basically kind of dealing with, do we accept these problems? How do we fight these problems? Do we just move on? Is there a way to solve them? And it's basically a word that's used among scholars, practitioners, stakeholders, and the general public that kind of all agree that there's something different about these problems. The big issues that come up again and again, which you should be paying attention for while you read, is the issue of whose public good is this really? And is it equitably distributed? Who's to say who should get more, who should get less of these types of issues? And finally, are there answers to these questions? Who should get more? Who should get less? What is the best way to fight this issue? So which these, there's a general category of different types of problems. Traditionally, in the natural sciences, we have scientific problems, such as friction. How much friction is there between these two objects? Or a chemical formula. How do we figure out what's the atoms that are in the structure? And when we do these, there's clear rules and outcomes. I'm sure in any high school physics class or chemistry class you remember, there's formulas and equations you plug into. It's pretty basic in that level. Early planning seemed to fall along those lines. How do you pave a street? How do you build public housing? How do you prevent certain diseases? Or even how do we purify this water? With these things, there are definitive outcomes. We know what we want. We want a paved street. We want clean water. And the systems are closed, so there's nothing that's going to get involved in you paving the street. There's nothing going to intervene. In public housing, if you're building a house and you are the government, there's no one that's going to kind of get in your way of that. Well, the new planning problems that we're talking about now are much more complex, such as education, redevelopment projects, law enforcement, where to put the highway. Because with these types of issues, someone's going to have to benefit, someone's going to get hurt. And it's unsure of which direction these webs all flow in. So, how do we get better police? How do we fight crime better? We don't know. If we put more police on the street, is that going to cause more or less crime? Is it just going to catch more of the crime? These types of questions, it's very ambiguous if we're actually solving the problem or not. So in reading this article, in the beginning, we kind of go through what the weak strut is. And that's at the intersection of goal formation, problem definition, and equity problems. We're going to go through these more specifically. Then the article lays out 10 characteristics of wicked problems, and then places these problems in context. So I'm just going to go through these, make sure you know what to keep your eye open for while you're reading. The big goal formation issues that are discussed deal with the objectives of what should be happening. As opposed to how do we do this, it's what should we be doing. And they go through some specific examples of that. And with this, finding the goals becomes the key to planning. Well, what do we use to find these goals? Do we use social indicators? Do we care birth rates, death rates, infant mortality? We're looking for how fast it gets to work, for traffic? Or are we looking for some greater public welfare, how many choices people have? Do we want cultural diversity options for our communities? These issues are not quite as clear, and therefore we have issues with goal formation. The other two is this makeability versus the feeling approach. With makeability, we have the belief that with rationality and with science, we can do anything we want given the system. However, there's also now, increasingly so, a feeling approach where maybe the system is the problem and we want to change that. Again, we're going back to what's our goal going to really be. And this ultimately comes down to there's really no mass society anymore. That's going to go through a student or a bunch of revolts that happened in the 50s and the 60s and 70s, where just new groups really staked their claims that we have our own values and our own interests, including students, the civil rights movement, peace movement, environmentalists. And these people now all have different values and different interests. So if we're trying to solve a goal, whose goals are we really looking for? And highly related to that is the definition or the problem of making a definition. So previously, again, in old times, it was how do we make things more efficient? How can we get the most out without putting the least in? But now that everything's so interconnected and there's networks everywhere, it's difficult to diagnose where the problem should be. So if, let's just say, we are trying to fight crime in an area, do we just put more cops on the street, or do we go even further back and do some like different types of education, different cultural awarenesses? Do we make stricter gun laws? There's all these different places that we could make an intervention, and to know exactly where really defines what the problem is. And since everything's interconnected, we can't quite do that. And then, as I was just kind of saying, if we go to an equal and greater problem at a different node, so if we, for example, put more police on the street, and this is big part of a big government project, where are we going to take the money from? So what other node, what other pieces of the larger society will have a problem when we try to fix this one problem? Again, this is a wicked problem. All right, so at this point, the authors then now give 10 characteristics where they describe our wicked problems. I'm not going to go through all of them, but they are the defining characteristics. But basically what is more important to kind of take out of this is that these are all part of the social science problems. And it's as if we're applying the paradigm of science and engineering with simple or more basic questions and answers to these more wicked, malignant, tricky, aggressive, vicious problems. And the article goes on to define how they're using all those terms as well. But the key that they're kind of saying is the social professions, this is a direct quote, were misled somewhere along the line into assuming they could be applied scientists, that they could solve problems in ways scientists can solve their sorts of problems. And this error has been a serious one. So think about that, what that really means. That means, do you think of yourself as a scientist, like a chemist or a physicist? Should you? Do you think the professionals who you'll be working with on your projects, or that you envision perhaps being someday, think of themselves as scientists? Or is there something different about you? Or are you the same? It's important to just kind of think of, as a social scientist, as an applied social scientist, are you actually a scientist? And if they are the same or different, which tools will you use from the scientist toolbox, and which will you use that are the advantages of a social scientist, where social scientists are able to engage with the civic community with civic engagement as well as community knowledge, whereas most other natural sciences occur alone in the lab. So after this slide, or these slides, you should have a good concept of what to be looking for in the Wickedness article. And that's going to be basically what makes contemporary planning problems different from those before and those of natural science. You should understand what the overarching difficulties of problem and solution definitions are. And finally, you should be able to understand some of the characteristics of wicked problems.